What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dunk on AP podcast. So today for APUSH, we are talking about period 3. So we did periods 1 and 2, and we've so far covered 1491 up until 1754 in this TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read series. And remember that it's just the bare minimum of what you need to know going into the AP test. The bigger stuff, you still got to know, but this is a good starting point. So we're starting off in 1754 for period 3, and the big reason why 1754 matters is because that's the start date of the French and Indian War. French and Indian War is awfully confusing because it's part of a larger war called the 7 Years' War, which actually lasted for 9 years, and some people refer to as the first true world war. I don't refer to it as that, but some people do. So what you get is a dispute between Britain and France at the height of their sort of colonial messiness over the Ohio River Valley, right around the year 1754. This breaks into a full-scale war that lasts, you guessed it, somewhere 7 to 9 years on the American continent. It's just one theater of that war. And what's going to end up happening is that the British win this war. It's something resembling a tie, but they do get the Ohio River Valley. And what's going to happen is that it's going to be extremely expensive for Britain to do that. They use colonial soldiers, what we would call now Americans, to help win this war. But they're not super impressed by the performance of those soldiers, and yet those soldiers will feel very much entitled to the land that they won in this war. As they start moving out west, there's going to be an issue with a native named Pontiac, who's going to assemble some tribes together and launch what is called Pontiac's Rebellion in 1763. This is going to royally freak out the British crown, and it's going to lead to the proclamation of 1763, which tells the settlers, hey, you can't move past a certain point. You can't move west into the Ohio River Valley. All of that land you just fought for. On top of the fact that you can't move into it, you're going to have to, in some ways, pay for that war because they're going to raise the taxes on those folks. So, what's going to happen is that the former policy of salutary neglect that Britain had, where they basically said, colonists, we're going to let you guys basically do what you want as long as you pay us a cut, is going to go away, and they're going to start much more directly taxing the colonists and having a much more direct control over them. This is going to lead to the implementation of a number of taxes. A few that you need to know is the Stamp Act, which is going to be a tax on paper and paper products. It's going to make the colonists very, very upset. And it's going to lead to more acts like the Townsend Acts and then eventually the Intolerable Acts, because colonists are going to get so unbelievably frustrated that the Sons and Daughters of Liberty are going to launch various types of boycotts. In the case of the Sons of Liberty, they can be violent boycotts. In the case of the Daughters of Liberty, you've just got stuff like boycotting British goods and stuff like that. But sooner or later, you're going to get the Intolerable Acts in the 1760s, which basically it shuts down Boston Harbor after the Boston Tea Party. It's also going to shut down, it's going to take away a number of fundamental rights, even something as simple as the Massachusetts Bay Colony Charter that allows them to exist. They're going to come under direct control of Great Britain. This is going to be a straw too far, and you're also soon going to get the Boston Massacre, and all of this is going to come together into the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And of course, the Declaration of Independence is inspired by Enlightenment ideals. Thomas Jefferson is the author, but a lot of guys are going to be behind it, and a lot of guys are going to sign it. Now, signing the Declaration of Independence does not make you independent. You are merely declaring your independence. You're going to have to fight for it. So America fights the Revolutionary War for a number of years, and they're going to win that war not because of any sort of strategic or numerical advantage over the British, which was in a lot of ways the greatest army on the earth at that time. They're going to win because of the leadership of George Washington and because of the desire for freedom that they have. And a lot of it is the fact that they are at home, they know the terrain better, and they are fighting for something while the British reserves are fighting against something. So Britain is going to fight this war tooth and nail against America, but in the end, America will be successful and will gain its independence. Now, it's going to first to be governed by the Articles of Confederation, which are a very, very loose, and by the way, I did just do the American Revolution in about 30 seconds. If you want to know more about that, that's not exactly what we're doing here. We're hitting the high points, don't forget that, okay? So at first, America is governed by the Articles of Confederation. Now here's something that you need to understand about the Articles of Confederation. They were drafted the way that they were by America's early leadership because they were afraid of a tyrannical power ruling over them. So what happens is that they don't give nearly enough power to a strong central government. The only power that they give to tax, to raise an army, or do anything like that is to state level governments, and that is not going to work. So what's going to happen that's going to expose the big problems with the Articles of Confederation is Shays' Rebellion, which is a time when a group of Massachusetts farmers who are angry at taxes that have been imposed on them are going to launch a rebellion that is going to show the weakness of the government. They are able to put it down, but it takes a whole lot. And this shows, hey, we need a constitutional convention to maybe revise these Articles of Confederation, but they get in there and they realize, dude, this thing is a full redo. This is no good, and we're going to need a true constitution. So we write our Constitution, and remember that through a lot of this, you have advocating for the Constitution in the Federalist Papers, largely written by Alexander Hamilton, with help from a few other guys. Now, when you get that Constitution, it is going to allow for an executive branch. Remember, they are very concerned with checks and balances, but one of the things that they do, they realize, hey, we do have to have somebody at the top of these checks and balances. And the logical person for that is George Washington, who becomes the first president. But the thing is that Washington, there isn't a whole lot that is clearly set out about this position. So more so than anything that George Washington really does, he's mostly important for the precedents that he set, such as naming a cabinet of advisors, which is not specifically mentioned in the Constitution, but more on that in just a moment. In that cabinet, he has two guys that are going to be, you could argue, more consequential to the actual governing of the United States than he is. And that is the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, and the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. So remember that Hamilton is a big government guy, and he is the face of a group called the Federalists. Okay, I call them a group because they're not necessarily a political party yet. But the Federalists are going to advocate for big government, and Hamilton is famously going to advocate for a financial plan in which the 13 states are going to assume the debt of the American Revolution all in themselves, so that they will have to pay that, and by doing so, they will show to the world, hey, we are able to pay credit, therefore you should be willing to lend us money as well. Also in that financial plan, he feels that there should be a tax on whiskey for farmers. This makes Thomas Jefferson royally upset because he feels that Alexander Hamilton wants to turn the America into a industrial manufacturing center, whereas Thomas Jefferson wants it to be much more rural and agricultural. Okay. And all within this is a fight over implied powers. What does the Constitution allow you to do? What does the Constitution not allow you to do? Thomas Jefferson says that you should be able to do only what the Constitution says, whereas Alexander Hamilton says you should do what the Constitution implies that you can do. In the end, Alexander Hamilton is going to win this argument, but this is still sort of a debate to this day. How far beyond the Constitution should we be able to go? Now, George Washington is also going to be the president while the Whiskey Rebellion happened, because farmers in the South are not too happy about that tax that Alexander Hamilton put on whiskey, because they used their excess grain to make extra money and sell whiskey, and this was how they supplemented their income. So Alexander Hamilton and George Washington actually had to go and help put this Whiskey Rebellion down, but it does show that you have a more central government. You're more capable of putting together, a response to revolutions like this. Now, what happens is that Washington, after 2 terms, says, I'm done, okay? And that's a massive precedent that he sets. And in his farewell address, he actually says, stay out of foreign wars and don't form political parties. He is replaced by a guy named John Adams, who's only going to be a 1-term president. Now, he is going to be important for a few reasons. He's not as important as Washington. He's not as important as Hamilton. He's not as important as Jefferson, okay? But he does matter. John Adams is president during the XYZ affair, which is when American Diplomats go to speak to a French ambassador and are told that they need to pay a bribe in order to do so. This royally upsets the American people. It is famously known as the XYZ affair, and it rallies some people around John Adams because they refused to pay a bribe to see the French ambassador. And don't forget that while Washington was president, remember, we've got a frosty relationship with the French and a frosty relationship with the British at different levels at this time. While Washington was president, he refused to intervene in the French Revolution. So John Adams, one more thing that he's known for is sort of the slight attack on personal liberties that he has through various acts of, like, the Espionage and Sedition Acts, and questions about should you be able to spy on people, should you be able to, how much freedom of speech should you have. So that's going to do it for the presidency of John Adams, and he is going to be replaced in 1800 by the presidency of Thomas Jefferson and what's known as the Jeffersonian Revolution. But that's much more period 4 stuff. We'll get there next time. So what we did in this episode, we covered 1754 all the way up to 1800. Remember, the American Revolutionary period right here, 1754 to 1800, really is best looked at in 3 sections. You've got the causes of the revolution, the fighting of the revolution itself, and you'll notice that I spent the least amount of time on that because it's actually the least important for the AP test. And then the outcomes of the revolution and the governing of the new nation. So I hope you guys had a good one. See you later.